I want to start out by kind of just remembering a book that I read about 25 years ago by Margaret Wheatley. Meg Wheatley was one of the first people to try to write a book on organizational development, organizational evolution, by understanding new things that we're learning from the world of science. So, from biology, from chaos theory, and from quantum physics, Meg's insight was that what we can learn is that, first of all, relationships are what matter, even at the subatomic level. Secondly, life is a vast web of interconnections where cooperation and participation are required. And finally, chaos and change are the only route to transformation. And then I want to add, within the last couple of years, Meg wrote a poem, and I'm just going to read you the second or the third stanza of the poem. Caught on the balance beam of meaningful work and terrifying times, I want to walk steady in the world, learning what balance feels like, blessed by the active presence of companions in a sacred world. So I work for the Carbon Leadership Forum, and our mission is to eliminate embodied carbon in buildings, materials, and infrastructure to create a just and thriving future. So we are very strongly aligned with NESEA and with your mission here and why all of you are here today. The key question for CLF, going way back to the very beginning, about 15 years ago, for CLF was, we need to understand this central question. What is whole life carbon? In other words, across the building industry 15 years ago, even maybe 5 years ago, even the topic of embodied carbon wasn't really part of the discussion. The focus was on operational energy, certainly, on energy efficiency, but not on total carbon, total lifetime carbon. And the reason that embodied carbon is so important, as you all know, I think, is that 90% of embodied carbon is upfront carbon. Carbon emissions that are created before day one of the use of any building. So that's crucial. So my story is that about 8 years ago, I was at a conference at the University of Washington, a meeting with a number of professors. I was the only non-academic in the room. And around the circle, we were there to say, well, why are you here? And my reason for being there was that I had this kind of very high-level idea that I was thinking of as the carbon trifecta. We've got too much carbon in the atmosphere, too much carbon going out in the atmosphere. We need to pull it back, find a way to create or transform that carbon into usable carbon-based materials that could be used in products in the marketplace. And also I said, and I'm really interested in this concept of collective impact. What is it that we can do together that we can't do separately? And across the room, a woman named Kate Simona said, well, so glad to meet you, Andrew. Have you ever considered that buildings are the biggest products on the planet? And I said, well, I just hadn't really thought about that, but you're obviously correct about that. And from our first conversation, Kate was like, I'm all about collective impact, even though I've never heard that term before. And the way that Kate expressed it was, we can move faster, farther, together. So from the very beginning for the Carbon Leadership Forum, as for NESEA, the core understanding is it begins with relationships. It begins with a basic attitude of collaboration. A few years ago, we sat down in a room with a couple of consultants and came up with what we call the theory of change. Our theory of change. How do we get to a fully decarbonized built environment? And it required two things we summed up. Number one, it was about improving the data and the methods, the way that people are able to scientifically, accurately, reliably report on carbon emissions connected with building projects, infrastructure projects. And that we have a long way to go in that regard. Secondly, we needed to inform effective and just policy. And that's important because the market by itself can't create the kind of transformation that we need. And 5 years ago, even, there were virtually no embodied carbon-related policies anywhere in the country, anywhere in North America, at any level of government. So I'd like you to understand, first of all, that collective impact is basically just about movement building. It's about how do large numbers of people come together to create lasting social change. And you can easily think about the civil rights movement, the anti-apartheid movement, the women's liberation movement, the LGBTQ movement, the green building movement. It's all about how do we build the movement that can change the world. And there are some folks at Stanford University a good number of years ago, it's about 22 years by now, I think, who came up with an initial definition, and the Collective Impact Forum has adjusted that definition just a little bit in the succeeding years. I'm going to read this to you, even though I know you can read it for yourself. I'll do that because I think it's really important to notice the words here. Collective impact brings people together in a structured way to achieve social change. Collective impact is a network of community members, organizations, and institutions who advance equity, an echo of the NESEA mission as well, by learning together, aligning, and integrating their actions to achieve population and systems level change. Collective impact has 5 essential ingredients, or conditions, I guess you could call them. And it starts with a common agenda. What is it? What's the common vision for the change that we want to make? What's the work that we want to do together? Or as I said a minute ago, that very initial question, what is it that we can do together that we cannot possibly accomplish by ourselves? Mm-hmm. It requires shared measurement. We're not out here just to enjoy ourselves, though we are, as a matter of fact. This is a time for celebration as well as a time for aligning our visions of the future that we want to create together, but we want to be able to measure the concrete impact that we're having on the world. Mutually reinforcing activities. What are the things that my organization, my network, my community can do in combination with your community, with your network, with your organization? Continuous communication. We have to be talking to each other and listening to each other really well all the time, with intention. And finally, it needs a strong backbone. It needs either one person or a dozen people who are the staff, who help the infrastructure work, who make sure that all of these things are paid attention to, shared measurement and continuous communications and mutually reinforcing activities, a shared learning environment supported. So I want to tell you a little story about partly how all of this happens. It was in the fall of 2019 when we called together a number, I think there were only like 7, maybe 8 organizations who came together in Seattle to begin talking to each other as what we called the NGO Roundtable on Embodied Carbon. And they included folks that you would immediately recognize from the AIA, from the Rocky Mountain Institute, from Architecture 2030, the U.S. Green Building Council, now I'm forgetting the name of one of those incredibly important organizations. I'm going to be really upset with myself later, but I won't tell them that I forgot them. A few years later, people started joining. We started having quarterly meetings of this collection of folks, and the number of people and the number of organizations kept on joining. By now, we've got 60 different organizations who are part of the NGO Roundtable. Actually, 2-3 years ago, we had to change the name to the NGO Government Roundtable because folks from the EPA and the Department of Energy and the Department of Housing and the General Services Administration just started showing up. So we changed the name of the gathering because of that. And it was just, tell us what you're doing. Tell us what you're up to. Tell us about the conference that you're holding next week. Make sure that I'm not organizing a conference on the same day on a different coast than the one that you're organizing. That's not by itself a collective impact initiative. It's a peer network. It's a learning network. It's a relationship building network. But what comes out of that are a lot of interesting conversations about what can we do together that we couldn't possibly accomplish by ourselves. And one of those ideas was the Embodied Carbon Harmonization and Optimization Project. The ECHO project, essentially a whole bunch of organizations, all of which, the Living Buildings Institute, that was the name of it. If anybody's here from ILFI, I'll back down to you later. Okay, thank you. You're forgiven. Thank goodness. So the idea, the building challenge, the lead standard for buildings from the USGBC, the MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, a 2040 challenge for MEP engineers, that structural engineers 2050 challenge, and so on and so on. All these organizations decide, let's get together and agree on a common way to describe the carbon footprint data from our projects, from either infrastructure projects or landscape projects or building projects. Let's figure out how to say all of that stuff together. A shared database, a shared data schema, potentially even a shared way to report that data using the same tool to the same database, so we have a common understanding of the challenge and common tools that would enable us to address it. And so the challenge that we came up with for ECHO was, we want all embodied carbon reporting at the whole building and whole project scale in the US to follow the same clear definitions and scopes of included impacts. And what about the rest of the world too? So that's a big vision, and it's happening as an unprecedented collaboration across the entire building industry to affect all of these ways in which we understand and report on embodied carbon. Collective impact is movement building. Think about the CLF regional hubs that started several years ago. We've now got, along with Boston, we've got another 29 or so regional hubs in different cities in North America, and beginning also around the world, in places like Asia and Africa and Latin America and Europe. The Green Commons peer networks, the Climate Heritage networks, building energy bottom lines from NESEA, AIA 2030, and on and on and on. The Home Builders Can, bio-based materials collective. And for CLF, our whole building LCA benchmark study. This is essentially how we do business, is through collaboration. This whole building LCA benchmark study, 30 different companies are participating to produce, publish, and submit their projects, LCA analyses of their projects to a common database, which a few days ago, and there are now, I think, almost 300 building projects in that database. A few days ago, we released all of this very high resolution data on all of those projects publicly, so that anybody can look at it, anybody can use it. Thank you. So the very short story is, in the past, it was all about only voluntary bottom-up efforts from individuals and organizations and minimal green building rating systems. In the present, we're shifting from voluntary to required. There's a growing number of policies, codes, and industry commitments. The market is evolving to the point that if you want to be a successful business, if you want to do well in this economy, you have to care about the carbon footprint of the materials and designs and the projects. And in the future, aligned initiatives, stronger, more transparent standards, data, and tools enable widespread action, and voluntary bottom-up efforts continue and magnify the impact of all of those initiatives. Stephen Jay Gould, who's an evolutionary biologist who taught for many years at Harvard University, came up with a new understanding of evolutionary biology. And he said that most evolution is characterized by long periods of evolutionary stability, infrequently punctuated by swift periods of branching speciation. That's a mouthful. What I take it to mean is it's about evolution and about revolution. It's about revolution in the midst of evolution. There are decades that go by where a few days of change takes place over those decades. And there are moments in time when decades of change happen in an instant. And I'd like to propose that we are today in a moment of branching, speciation, a very, very swift, remarkably crazy period of chaos and change. How does lasting change take place? There are some who would tell you that one person by themselves can simply accomplish great good or great evil. And I'm here to tell you that it's not unlikely that individuals have a major impact on history, but true change, lasting change, structural change at the system level takes place when a few score, a dozen or more, maybe 100, maybe 1,000, maybe 1,000,000 people sharing a common vision for the world they want to live in, act together in harmony to optimize the opportunity to create the kind of world that we want to live in. That is how lasting change takes place. In the tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, which comes out of a world of feudalism and martial combat, there was the notion of a warrior, and the Buddhists created a definition of a new term. A spiritual warrior is one who is motivated by compassion, who manifests kindness, courage, and self-awareness beyond aggression, and one who seeks to serve others. We've all heard of this metaphor. It's so common, I suppose, that I'm not even going to tell you what's in that picture. But the metaphor is like, when you look at it one way and you're an optimist, you look at it another way, you're a pessimist. I'm here to tell you that's not the only two choices you have. The way to look at that glass, if you're a spiritual warrior, is to say, look, here's a glass, it's got some water in it, I wonder who needs it and how I can get it to them.
Yeah.
So why do we work to decarbonize buildings? Well, it might be because you're in favor of a specific public policy. You may have even have helped to develop that policy that you think will be helpful. You might think that because your company lives in this market and this economy, it's important for you to care about decarbonization because it'll be more profitable for your company. Not a bad reason. Innovation, you're interested in doing things in a new and better way. Why not? That's a good thing. Especially if you're a young person, you might be coming into this economy, into this new job, and thinking, I can make my mark by pushing the boundaries, by being an adventurer, by exploring new frontiers, by learning and developing things that haven't been invented before. That's a career path for me. Why not? You want to solve the big climate challenge, the existential crisis of our time, of our generation. Yes, why not? You're fearful or you're hopeful about what you might be able to accomplish, what we can do together. Yes, why not? But I'm guessing that there could be something else. It could be that what every single person in this room is here for is the same thing. We're here because we are lovers. We love our children, we love our partners, we love our parents, we love our families, we love our neighbors, we love the community, the country, the place that we live. We love humanity, we love the people of the earth. And we want to create a world in which all of those people can thrive. There's a positive feedback loop that begins to operate when we act out of love. Love leads to action, which provides the basis for hope, which in turn spurs further action. We change the world through love. 10 years ago. Sorry about that. 10 years ago, I was in Karachi, Pakistan, and I was asked to do a keynote speech at a conference called The Future of Cities in South Asia. And they invited me to speak on the topic of why is compassion an essential ingredient in imagining the cities of the future. And while I was there, I was invited by my host to go with them to a grade school. And I spoke to several classes of 10, 11, and 12-year-old girls about compassion in cities. And they gave me this teacup. And I know that you can read it, but I'm going to read it for you anyway because I love this teacup. Humans are like tea bags. They never realize their strength until they're put in hot water. Well, I'd like to suggest to all of you that the water is really hot right now. And I want you to invite you all to jump into the hot water with me and just see how strong we can be. So now we're going to do something a little bit unusual. I'm going to add, yeah, go for the unusual over there. So I'd like to ask you, what time is it now? It's like 9:40. We're going to spend the next 5 minutes. Turn to somebody that you're sitting right next to. It'd be great if it was somebody you've never met before, but even if you know them already, it's okay to talk to them. I'm going to ask you to have, in the next 5 minutes, to share with the person you're sitting with, what is the movement that you're engaged in? What is the question that you once had to ask yourself, I want to do that, but I can't do it all by myself? What is the movement, what is the initiative or the network that you're part of that is all about movement building? And maybe, what's the thing that you've learned from it? And then I'm going to pick people and ask them to tell me what they heard. All right, 5 minutes, go for it.